Today's episode of Wine Time Fridays is brought to you in part by our friends at Seasons of Coeur d'Alene, Pilgrim's Market, and J. Bookwalter Wine.
It's been a long week, right? Are you ready to wind down? Why not? It's time for the Wine Time Fridays podcast with Shelley and Phil. Neither are sommeliers, but both have a deep passion for life, each other, and of course, delicious wine. And now, here to talk about this week over a glass of wine is Shelley and Phil. It's wine time!
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil and another guest. To start off April, we'll probably cool off on the guests for a week or two as we catch our breath. But Shelley, today is April 3rd, episode 311. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
It's wine time.
It is.
Today we are so happy and a little off the beaten path a bit. We've got Daniel Grace, who has written a book, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube. It's called In the Wake of Golgotha. One of those two. Daniel, welcome to Wine Time Fridays, and you can correct my pronunciation.
I would never correct you. And buonasera a tutti. I'm just going to throw people off with my sort of bilingual narrative here. Just keep everyone on their toes.
I love it. Well, here's the thing. Daniel has had his fingers in a number of industries throughout his career. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of all started in the wine industry. Is that right? Your family has a winery?
Exactly. I have the incredible good fortune of operating a family estate, which my family started with my father, a native son of Steubenville, Ohio. You know, I always talk about, they say, how did you get into the wine business? I said, well, my father, hails from the phenomenal wine producing region of Southern Ohio. And of course, I get some great looks there. But my father actually had the opportunity to acquire a property in the heart of the Chianti Classico region in Panzano and Chianti in about almost 30 years ago. So we're about 28 harvests deep, and it takes about that long to get to know your own fruit and soil and hills and soul and
get a rhythm going and that sort of thing. I'm going to have Daniel tell us what I just opened. It's a 2022, and take it from here.
Okay, so before we get into the wine, just a quick word about the 2022 vintage. So actually a surprisingly lovely, bold, balanced, bountiful vintage. But in Panzano, where we are, we had somewhat of an epic apocalyptic hailstorm come through our region and our little village on the southern tip of the Conca d'Oro on August 15th, I believe the date was. Around dinner time in a really violent hailstorm. And we were actually one of the more fortunate Panzano producers where I say the term only, but only lost about 30% of our yield in the course of about 15 minutes. And there were producers all around Panzano that took a much bigger hit. And just kind of this incredible, obviously, reminder of sort of the suspense and the magic, but also the challenges of producing wine or any
Mother
harvest.
Nature is undefeated, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is a Chianti Classico, 100% Sangiovese. To be a Chianti Classico, does it have to be 100% Sangio, or is there?
So as a Chianti Classico producer, the threshold, the minimum Sangiovese, it used to be 70%, and then about 15 years ago, it crept up to an 80%, which is, I think a tremendous move. Our Chianti Classicos, as it says on the bottle, SoloSangiovese, since our first vintage, after we built the cellar and the winery of vineyards that have been first planted in 1500 by Franciscan monks, all of our Chianti Classicos have always been 100% Sangiovese, always will be. And it's just something we're sort of hell-bent on, sort of authenticity as our compass. And so, so 100% Sangiovese, Chianti Classico, fairly straightforward aging of actually French oak barriques. Little shift in notes there in terms of aging. Stylistically, if you'd allow me to jump straight in there. I rarely talk about kind of the notes and the palate of a wine, and I really speak more about the intent. And for a number of years, we were acutely aware of sort of the shadow of our ancestors, if you will, and kind of a sea of mediocrity that was commonplace with Chianti Classico, and really sort of this vast ocean of lazy, flabby Chianti Classico wines of the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. So for us, it was really a pursuit of cleanliness. So what's in the glass, I'll get there eventually, kind of talking about the wine. But what's in the glass is sort of this beautiful, bright, youthful, vibrant kiss of bright red cherry Sangiovese fruit. So certainly we're leaning into our lower altitude vines, younger vines, all under 15 years old. And really just there's a momentum, there's an energy, there's a youthfulness. And for us, this beautiful reminder that Chianti Classico can put a smile on your face. It can be delightful, whimsical, easy, lovely. So that's our intention around the 22 Chianti Classico Annata.
So you are really pushing my patience,
Yes.
right? Because I see the wine, I've swirled and twirled the wine, and I've even smelled the wine, but I haven't tasted it because we can't. It's against all Wine Time Fridays rules and laws. Look at the manual, Shelley. We're going to do a proper Wine Time Fridays toast, and then we're going to continue on with this because this has got a great nose to it. To health, wealth, and abundance, gratitude, romance,
and peace on earth.
and peace on earth.
All of the above, especially the last one. Cheers. Salute.
The thing, this is tart. This has got that bright tartness in the back. The thing about Chianti that I found, it really is so food friendly, right? It really begs for food. This one, I don't think that's different.
It is bright. And we have talked about flabby Chiantis in the past.
Exactly. That's what I was kind of alluding to is in the past we've had Chianti and I'm like, it's fine, but there's no nose to it. And it's like she said, flat, but not a whole lot of a taste profile. And then you put it with lasagna or pizza or whatever, and it comes alive. This will stand alone in a glass without food. So it's a win-win situation, in my opinion.
So from our perspective, I think, what used to be these sort of taboo words, right? Easy, the drinkability of a Chianti Classico, to me, these are words that are everything, and not just from a sort of a poetry perspective, right? This is about the sustainability and the survivability of our region, right? These wines need to stand on their own. And it was fascinating. This very wine that's in your glass, the 22 Chianti Classico, I was recently tasting with a somm in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I was tasting with the wine and he kind of had this interesting expression on his face. And he put the glass down and he said, "This is a freaking porch pounder." And I hadn't heard that term before. And I was like, you were just
right?
speaking the gospel to me. I was like, that is beautiful because, again, that drinkability, Chianti Classico. And I love the fact that I spend so much less time in Italian restaurants. I love the fact that these, especially 100% Sangiovese Chianti Classico, these are now sort of all season, all cuisine wines. I mean, certainly in some of our warmer markets, right? This is a wine, chilled as a beautiful chilled summer barbecue wine with anything off the grill in the heat of a July is incredible, right? This is an impeccable fish taco wine, and I love the fact that it's not just sort of the pizzas and the pastas in sort of October to March.
Right.
And this is all part of sort of the new dawn of the Chianti Classico region.
And they're like, you can't chill a red.
I know.
And,
I love it.
they're like Gamay. There's some Gamay you want chilled. And you're not saying put it in the fridge and come out at 41 degrees. You're saying put it in the fridge for 20, 25 minutes. So it gives it that little chill on it that makes it even more refreshing when the sun is out.
Absolutely. No, and so to me, I love seeing kind of just the broader spectrum and the broader sort of application of Sangiovese. Like to me, it's sort of music to my ears, but again, I'm biased.
And for our listeners, Sangiovese is the grape. Chianti is the region.
Episode 311, we hope our listeners have figured it out by now.
So just a note about Sangiovese. The term has a lot of meaning to me, and we'll even get into it when we get into the book. But to me, the term, the etymology of the term comes from the Latin. So Sangio is blood, and Jove, the Jupiter, the Roman god Jupiter. And so Sangiovese, the story behind Sangiovese goes back to Roman mythology when the Roman god Jupiter was wounded in battle on pre-Etruscan soil and his blood fell into the earth, from which the first vines and the first grapes of wine were born. So Sangiovese, we take this seriously.
Oh, heart. I mean, it is the birth of it, really. Yeah.
It's everything. Exactly.
Had mentioned the 2022 vintage, August 15th, if I remember correctly, about 5:30. You had this huge hailstorm, and hail comes in different times of the year depending on your region. Here in our area, it seems to like to come around spring, knocking all those buds off, which really screws things up. But in August, when is this typically? I'll back up. When are you typically a 2 to 3 week window that you're harvesting these Sangio grapes, and where did that hailstorm hit in that process?
Sure. So typically we're looking at a good 4 to 5 week harvest run that will typically start anywhere from, say, the 10th to the 15th of September, loosely speaking. And so we were a month out, and so there was obviously good fruit on the vine. But what's so interesting is that time frame of harvests is all over the map. And usually it was sort of this August window where we're praying every day because these incredible dark, dramatic, apocalyptic clouds sort of roll up to the Concadoro. But and without getting too deep into just sort of the impact of a little bit of climate chaos, that window of hail now starts, literally I was in Panzano, and all of a sudden we're having this really erratic, incredible chill, then this, temperatures, getting up in the high 20s Celsius. And so we're having sort of this early bud break, but then we're also having these early spring hails. And so that's the reason I don't have any hair. It's because the chaos of climate. But what are you going to do?
That makes complete sense. Before we move on from the wine, which we'll probably be talking about the wine interspersed throughout this episode, I hope. But I looked, because I'm always trying to find something we can put in the show notes, and I found the 2020. Which was sold out. This is the 22. Is this available in the States?
Yeah, so the 22 is widely available in the States. We are, and I'll get a little bit geeky on the business side of things. About 10 years ago, we shifted our model. So instead of having a national importer and being sort of widely distributed, potentially also thinly distributed in all states, we're now sort of what they call a direct importer into about the 40 states that we're active in. And so the 2022 Chianti Classico, it's our workhorse. All right, this is our DNA. This is who we are and what we do. We produce of the 22, well, let me use an average number. On average, we're producing about 70,000 bottles of Chianti Classico annually, and that number can ebb and flow, given our dear Mother Nature.
Right. And so, as we talked before we went live, or not live, but before we hit record, you're not in Idaho, but you're. This is a funny thing about distribution, right? So you self-distribute into 40 states. We'll get you into Idaho at some point, but that is probably a very smart move. Now, you need to have some resources to do that. I know Molly Duker created a whole import company just for that. The distributors when you don't go with that model, you're relying on them to their sales reps to talk to their retailers, whether it's a wine bar or a retail store or a bottle shop, to really sell them on this, right? And we love our sales reps around here, but they're human. Sometimes they get a little lazy and they won't be pitching
Or it's not their favorite grape.
or whatever it is. And so they're not truly representing your brand like they could, right? So when you take things into your own hands, there are other challenges, but you don't have that one so much now. Now you have to get to the distributors to buy from you, right?
Exactly. So our model is, so I'll work with each of those states, and we have a specific relationship with each distributor in each state. And some are big, right? So we work with the breakthroughs in California and Nevada and some other states. We work with, Empire in New York. But for most of our markets, we find our sweet spot is working with more sort of boutique importers of typically French and Italian wines, where this is a family business. And so where we can work with them in market, and it becomes a much more meaningful relationship. And so, at the end of the day, any distributed business, it's about, what does that relationship look like? And not just how do we maintain sort of being top of mind, but how do we have sort of this mutual affinity? And that's that's the dance, right? And it's beautiful when it works.
Yes, it is. By the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at mid-20s for this price point, right? About $25, give or take.
Yeah, I mean, right now the average price of the 22 Chianti Classico in the United States is, I want to say, like 22.95. I mean, it's rarely over that $23 mark.
Wow.
And that's even including, we're in this window of tariffs and whatnot. And so I think to kind of, it's a category, and I think certainly this wine, this is a category, and this is a wine that certainly punches above its weight,
Sure.
relative to price, for sure.
Well, gosh.
Maybe we should talk about the book.
Yeah. Should we tease that? Or should we talk a little bit? You want to talk about it right now, or go into a break and do it? Or how do you want to do that, Shelley? It's your podcast too.
Let's take a break.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to dive into this historic gem that Daniel's written. Yeah, it's good stuff. And we might even talk a little bit about Super Bowls. I don't even know.
Okay, I'm up for all of it.
Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil and Daniel Grace, not Grace. It's Grace. By the way, can you just pronounce this for me, please?
So Il Molino di Grace, and I get a lot of fingers in my chest, and they say Dove Daniele Grace, and I'm saying Grace, Grace, you call it what you will. So quick word about nomenclature. So Il Molino. Molino is windmill. And when we had the good fortune to acquire the estate, there was actually the remnants of an old Etruscan watermill that stood at the base of the property, which we renovated, resurrected as a working sort of feature of the farm as a windmill. So Il Molino, and then Grace, our last name, or Grace if I have my Italiano on.
The family winery's name is
Il Molino di Grace.
Thank you. Okay.
We passed that test.
I feel like I need a nap. But I'm going to say this. The book, In the Wake of Golgotha, and he will correct me and make me right at some point, which nobody's been able to do my whole life. So that'll be quite a testament. Set against the backdrop of the First Crusade, the story follows a disparate group of individuals, knights and monks and commoners, swept up in the religious fervor to reclaim Jerusalem. However, Shelley, the heart of the narrative isn't just the war, it's the true cross.
In the medieval times.
Did I sum that up anywhere close?
We may have taken a left turn, but I think we're getting the right
Okay.
flavor.
Did you ask your assistant to help you?
Did ask my assistant to peruse in its entirety the entire PDF, but we're going to actually get the full Monty right now.
Exactly. I can lay it out for you if you like. So Golgotha or Golgotha, there's a lot of pronunciations of the place and of the hill and of the moment and of the chapter. So just to set the table, so Golgotha is also known as Calvary Hill, the plateau of skulls where Christ was crucified. And so what the book is about isn't necessarily about that moment or that rise, but more from my perspective, what I found very interesting was the aftermath and the wake and those who have fallen from and on Golgotha. And so what the book In the Wake of Golgotha is about, it's a reimagining of two of perhaps the most infamously damned villains to exist in human history, and it's that of Judas Iscariot and Pontius Pilate, and their sort of eternal shadow and damnation and sort of timeless tumble through history. Because from my perspective, these are two characters, for better or for worse, that ultimately have been sort of lynched by history and culture and religion. And yet there's very little known about them and their story and how they came to Golgotha and how they left or stayed at Golgotha. And so I wanted to retell that story primarily in a modern setting. And so it's about fundamentally, this is a story about guilt and sorrow and sin and hopelessness and hope and redemption, things that we all struggle with. So how's that for a setup?
No, that's really, really, really cool.
Lots of human pain points.
A lot of human pain points. It took you quite some time to write this, did it not?
So this was a 5-year journey, and I think like anything, probably the thoughts and the genesis go incredibly further back than that. But I was sort of struck by this notion of the loss of legend. And when I talk about legend, it might be mythological characters, it might be religious characters, it might be literary characters, Shakespearean characters, it might be comic book heroes, and as we sort of ended the last century, and I find ourselves as the culture we're now in, these heroes and sort of anti-heroes that have been so dominant in human history suddenly became somewhat irrelevant.
Mm.
So what was interesting to me, and this is sort of this idea was born around this death and this wake of legend. And as I created this cast of characters, one of which was this Judas Iscariot character, and kind of looking at his relation to history and religion and culture. And I was fascinated ultimately about what we don't know about both Judas and about Pilate. And so it's been a fascinating journey.
What?
I thought you had a follow-up question.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I didn't have a follow-up. I was wondering what you were doing.
Well, no. So a friend of ours has a book podcast. I just wanted to make sure I got the name right because I'm going to see if she can actually review this book on her podcast.
Who is that?
LaDonna.
Oh,
I'm in.
I thought you might be. And this book that came out about a month ago, give or take a day, is available on Amazon. The link is in the show notes. So click on In the Wake of Golgotha. I'll never get
Golgotha, tomato.
And on Kindle, $10 hardcover. If you really want the good one, $32, and then paperback is about 22, give or take. I think I'm close on that. At least I'm right on those things.
You know what's quite funny is I find myself, if you think about wine, right? We're talking about this, a Chianti Classico, a nata, and it's years of nurturing fruit and toiling in fields and sort of wrapping your head around it and bringing it to market. And it's a multi-year journey to sell a $22 bottle of wine. And then I find myself on the other side of things. I'm like nurturing ideas and crafting a script and giving my soul into this and then bringing it to market to sell a $22 book. So it's so funny. I'm like, I can't get away from this price point, it seems.
I
Well,
know.
it's
Seems like it should be $150.
There you go.
well,
Thank you.
but this is your first book.
It is my first book. So this is my first rodeo.
And what they say, although in your case it's not going to be the case, you're going to make loads of money off this, but they say that that first book is kind of a push as it kind of launches you into your other books. Have you heard that?
I have heard that. And what's interesting, was super fortunate working with a fairly small independent publisher to get a two-book deal. The next book, you'll definitely have me back on the show because it's set against the backdrop of sort of timeless, priceless, stained vineyards and dark, bloody, buried secrets. So very wine related. And so yeah, this is an interesting journey. It's a very interesting journey. And so, one of the things that I found myself in doing some of these conversations and some of the events is it's a fascinating conversation when you start talking to people about what people think about pairing wine with what's on their plate. And I'm so interested about what do people pair with what they read. And it's really interesting when you talk about not just sort of the seasonality, but the topic and the genre. And some people, and again, a lot of times it's not even about drinking with when you read, but people like to have a glass of something nearby. And depending on the subject matter, right, you can go, a bloody red Sangiovese to get into a bloody red history. But obviously for a rom-com or a beach read, it's very different. But it's interesting when you start the conversation about books. And then you start asking people, and whether it's thrillers or whether it's historical fiction, just sort of nudging the question. And all of a sudden people think, huh, that's interesting. That's a book that I was drinking, scotch with, or that's a book where, I actually found myself, I went into something sparkling, or I find it fascinating.
I mean, a cup of coffee, but I hadn't thought about the wine. And that,
Different kinds of them, yeah.
I mean, I'm not a coffee drinker. I know coffee drinkers that have one, two, maybe three of their favorite kinds. There's, okay, thousands of different kinds of wines. Which one do you choose to read with this specific style of book, right? And I think it's a fascinating question. Wine can be paired with so many things. We have a series called Wine is Like Music, where we bring a musician on and we have three wines lined up and they'll taste one wine and then play what they're tasting.
Oh, fascinating. I love
Right.
that.
And it's just, there's so many different ways. When did we have this conversation recently? You can't, you're not going to pair something with what it was, beer. Beer. We had that conversation with somebody. You're not going to, beer is not something you're going to pair a lot of food with. Like wine, it's got an evolution, whether you're starting with an appetizer or working through your entree. They have dessert wines. So there's really nothing in the world quite like wine, you know?
It's funny, the music thing, I think as a segue to the pairing of literature, a conversation I had recently, we had that exact conversation. We're talking about Italian wines, and someone was making the point about, sort of the minerality of volcanic wine and sort of the acidity and just the beautiful sort of light elegance of it. And they're talking about jazz, and we started talking about Chianti Classico and our Chianti Classico. And, I wouldn't necessarily go on record as this, but I was like, okay, we're like 1970s Rolling Stones. And that was kind of where I ended up. I'm like,
The magazine or the band?
the band, obviously. I mean, come on. Did I mention I was born in London? So again, I'm partial. I'm biased.
Angie.
See, exactly. It's
This
more
is
than nostalgia. So that's the thing, and why I love that. I was proud of my own reference on that. Is it's not just nostalgia. Like the music stands, and actually the music. Some of Angie, "Simply for the Devil," "Give Me Shelter," "Like a Fine Wine." That music has never sounded better, and it's just sort of the timelessness of it. I was kind of like, okay, I think I'm onto something here.
Yeah, no fooling. I'm curious because about I don't know, it was a month, 5 weeks ago, there was a really, really big celebration in Seattle where 1 million people showed up downtown and lined the streets. 5 week, month ago, 5 weeks,
I thought
6 weeks.
5 months.
No,
Okay.
Oh,
no.
I know where you're going. Oh, we're
Yeah.
breaking up. We're breaking up.
Nope, nope, we're not. Not at all. The Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl. It sounds like Daniel's not a big Seahawk fan, but I bet he could probably, with all honesty, without throwing in, yeah, throw a little cyanide in with that wine on that celebration because it's the Seahawks. No, no. What would you pair with a celebration, something like that? That
You
I
know,
mean,
this is as a San Francisco guy and as a lifelong 49ers fan, you know, you're killing me. And this is someone who I think the past 10 Super Bowls I've watched at, 2 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning, in Panzano.
yeah.
So yeah, this one was it was tricky. But I think with Seattle, with like the nature of that Super Bowl being such a sort of this defensive slugfest, so we had sort of spoken a little bit sort of pre-show. I think you may have an affinity towards our neighbors to the south in Brunello, right? And so there was something bold and rich and unapologetic, yet incredibly sophisticated and dare I say elegant about the Seahawks defense, right? That I might say. Okay, I'm gonna go Brunello on that defense, right? This is
Well, look, I completely understand your disdain for the Seahawks, but it's not like they won, down in the home stadium of San Francisco. Of
yeah. No, that's tough. That's tough.
course, next year they may win in the home stadium of the Rams, so that will be double the fun.
Right, exactly. I'll just stick to my soccer. That's fine. It's easy, and I go to these, exactly. I go to all my local Fiorentina matches and I'm drinking espresso at halftime and it's all very civilized.
So you're in the DC area right now, pitching the book, pitching the wine. How much time do you spend in the States versus your time in Italy?
Great question. So the States is certainly our biggest partner, our biggest market. And despite the fact when we showed up in the 90s as an American family and we thought, oh, here we go, we're purists, we're like the good Californians we are, you'll get a kick out of this. As I mentioned up front, these are 500-year-old vineyards. The only significant change that we made to the land was we did what the responsible Californians we are. We ripped out all the Cabernet just so we weren't tempted to scratch that itch, right? And um, so we did that, and I forgot the question.
Could I ask a
I
question?
went. I think I just.
Oh, how much time do you spend? Yes.
How much time? Okay, thank you. See, exactly.
This is why Shelley, one of the many reasons why
She's
Shelley is here, because I
keeping
go
us on
all
track. Exactly. So, I spend a lot of time. So about 70% of our exported wine comes to the States. As I mentioned, we're in almost about 40 states. And so, I would say there's been times where almost half my time is spent, and everywhere, Ohio, Wisconsin, Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida, the Carolinas, the Eastern Seaboard, the Northwest. And obviously California is a huge market for us as well. So a lot of time spent in various states promoting the wines, and it's a slog, but as I say before about our partners, it's a pleasure, and it's necessary, right? These are challenging times to say the least in the wine business, and so we're having to sort of elevate and escalate and accentuate our hospitality offerings in Panzano, and at the same time, give as much love as possible to the markets that we're in. Right? We can't take our place in the market for granted, and part of it is a good problem. Part of it is, I think, in 2026, certainly in the Chianti Classico space, there's so much good product. And I think with the emergence of the Gran Selezione as a category, which we've been flag bearers of the designation since the 2010 vintage, if you were to go into a local Total Wine, for instance, and even 10 years ago, if you go in and you're blindfolded and you grab a bottle of Chianti Classico, you had about a 50-50 chance of it being a good quality bottle of wine.
And a nice
Expressive.
representation of
Exactly. Now in 2026, you're going to find a good bottle of Chianti Classico, and that's a good thing. So it's a high tide rising all ships, and so these are good problems that I think we've not only I mentioned previously, kind of coming out of this sea of lazy, flabby wines in decades past, partly because I think we came from generations of lazy, flabby winemakers, and I think now we don't take the market for granted. I think for decades we may have taken the U.S. market for granted, and I think we're finally putting to bed. I see it in people's eyes, right? The old days of the wicker basket, the fiascos with the candle of the old days of the Chianti, and I think now, slowly but surely, the era we're in, we're getting the respect that we deserve, which is about time.
complacency is the devil.
For sure, for
And
sure.
uh, when we talk about old world wines, old world wine regions coming into the States, I mean, this is something where the United States, we're 35, 40 years, something like that, of really producing some pretty good wines. But the Europeans, many times, were like, they don't know what they're talking about. We can send this stuff over. They'll drink it like nothing because they don't know. But see, to your point, that's kind of changed a little bit, and the palates change, the education changes, the experience changes. I not shy to say this, Shelley and I have noticed a big change in our Chardonnay drinking, because the Chards that we used to like that were, 10, 12, 14, $15 price points, we're like, what's wrong with these now?
Right.
Because there's that elevation. It does not mean that wine, the more expensive a wine, the better it is. Typically, when you find the higher priced wines, you hope they're going to be higher quality. Okay. This being a $23 bottle of wine is punching way above its weight class, And so when you are talking about the wine market in general is suffering a bit, I believe it's a correction. Okay. California has been able to get high dollars, and they kind of have to charge that a little bit because the real estate costs, you don't just flip the switch off there. There's still very viable costs. So their wines need to be more expensive, but now there's more regions that are competing with those wines, and the quality is going head to head, and there's going to be a correction. And when you enter the market with something like this for under $25, it's going to fly off the shelf. And it's good you're making 70,000 bottles, because you need to fill the market.
Because we have to, right? Exactly. And it's interesting. So, when even up as we get into our Chianti Classico Reservas, we get into our Gran Selezione, we have a Super Tuscan, which is a term that I grimace in pain when I say it, because it takes the market out of Tuscany. And you'll be pleased to know that our Super Tuscan is all indigenous fruit: Sangiovese, Colorino, Caniolo. But again, I think those wines, those higher end wines, especially where we are right now in the market, it really is, let's go back to basics, and let's make our, kind of our entry level first step into the property, our Chianti Classico Annata, really shine. And it's really not about kind of that gateway drug that it used to be about. How do we then sell, kind of sell up the hill? And there's markets, and there's accounts, and there's opportunities for those wines, but they're pretty narrow parameters, and that's okay. I'm, to be honest, with the problems in the industry, I feel pretty blessed, actually, of being what used to be just a Chianti Classico producer. No, really. And I think now it's a question of, damn straight, like we're what the market needs right now. And I think we are, and I'll stand, not only with my fellow Gran Selezione producers, but just across the board, coming out of the collection a few weeks ago in Florence. I mean, these wines are they're exquisite, and they're again all the things that they should be. That the market, as the market demands more and more authenticity, right? It's we're making less wines that we think are market friendly, and certainly coming out of Panzano, right, where there's 31 producers, all of which are organic. We're not necessarily saying we think we know what we want to shove down the market's throat. What we're saying is let's bring the market into Panzano, right? And that's what the market wants.
I love
Yep.
that.
And now we're in a trust economy, so that's even more important.
For
Big
sure.
time. Big time.
For
Trust
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is
So
only, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, just so just to put a bow on it, it's a delicate time for sure. It's a delicate time.
What other wines do you produce?
So we have a Trebbiano, which is we do a lot of hospitality at the property. We get a lot of visitors. We get upwards of 20,000 people come to the property a year. We're beautifully located right between Florence and Siena. So the Trebbiano was something we typically had served. We reserved that just on site. Um, but it's a lovely, again, kind of lean muscled, beautiful, kind of mineralic expression of the Tuscan forest floor. It's a wine that doesn't touch any wood, straight out of steel into bottle. And so that's a wine actually we're just starting this year to bring to the States, which is fun. We produce
Oh,
100, we produce a Rosato, 100% Sangiovese rosé, that's something we don't export. And then we get into kind of the Sangiovese portfolio. We have an entry level IGT, kind of our baby Tuscan, our Il Volano, which is a Merlot Sangiovese blend. And then we have the Chianti Classico Nata, the Chianti Classico Reserva, Chianti Classico Gran Selezione, and then our Gratias Super Tuscan IGT. That's a small production, only about 3,000 bottles, top of the hill, about 500 meters, single vineyard, co-fermented field blend of indigenous fruits, Sangiovese, Colorino, and Caniolo.
is this your highest produced wine here? This one?
In terms of volume,
Yes.
oh, heads and tails above everything else for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of this is the one that helps support the rest in a sense, right?
But
Like you said before, the heavy lifter.
exactly, and I think that everyone, I think every producer goes through that moment of scrambling uphill, which we make some beautiful high-end wines. But then you kind of come back to again this like we're there because we fell in love with Panzano. We fell in love with the Chianti Classico region. We're a Chianti Classico producer, and so again, that's something. It's not like, well, this helps us pay the bills. Like, no, this is why we're here. This is us naked and raw and exposed. And
Uh, I have one more question, and then we'll start wrapping up. Um, in my notes, I have this spent 12 months in a mix of stainless steel Slavonian oak casks and French barriques. Is that true?
so I think that's probably on us. I think we probably have some older information on our site where that came from. And we used to have it actually kind of a nice mix of about 30% of Slovenian oak. We're back into our rotation of all of our barriques and our tonneau are all French oak. We've invested in some larger cask, kind of unusual format Austrian oak, but that's reserved for our Super Tuscan. And so it's 12 months French oak barriques only.
So it was the Slovenian oak casks that really caught my eye.
Yeah, which is interesting, and I think like a lot of us, we've tried different oak, right? There's some interesting Hungarian oaks, there's some interesting oaks like Transylvanian oaks,
Yeah.
but you kind of come back to basics, and I think with the French oak, especially as we became laser focused on that cleanliness, and that sort of that leaner muscled Chianti Classico, you kind of come back to the French oak and let's not mess with that.
Yeah,
We should talk about our wine word of the week.
we should.
Uh-oh.
You want to do that?
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Really?
Galestro?
I think so.
Hmm.
Cholesterol.
You nailed it. Okay, this is our soil. Okay, what should we talk about? I love this. This is
There
perfect.
we go. See, I'm right like a broken clock twice a day.
Yeah,
Go
you nailed
ahead.
it. Galestro. And so so one of the things about Penzano and really the lion's share of the Chianti Classico region is oftentimes if people haven't had the good fortune of visiting, what people are so surprised about is this is steep, rocky, thick forest land. It's not like our neighbors to the south in Brunello, that's more of that Hollywood postcard of, soft rolling hills and gentle rolled haystacks. Like this is dramatic, rocky soil, steep, porous soil. And
Challenge to harvest, right?
Gee, yes, yes, but I think from our perspective, this is when you earn your medal, right? This is when, I feel my age in harvest. It's those 5 weeks when you're wrestling with the earth. But it's stunning. But at the same time, I'm also grateful because, when we do get those summer deluges of rain, this Galestro soil, it's very rocky, very porous. And so we have some steep hills at the property. We're about 350 to 500 meters in our 25 hectares just in Panzano. And so this soil is perfect for the Sangiovese that loves its sort of wrestle. And so we're about 90% Galestro. We have these wisps of Pietraforte and Albarese that kind of gives it that kind of mid-elevation kind of tension in the terroir. But Galestro it's our heartbeat.
And it's really primarily found in the Chianti region, which
Absolutely.
would absolutely separate the terroir from any other Sangiovese produced in the world, because it will never. We had a winemaker on last week, and he said people are coming up to me. It was a Washington Tempranillo, and he said people are saying to him, "This is nothing like a Spanish Tempranillo."
Go
Gee,
figure.
I wonder why.
Right.
Also, in my notes, I put this soil type. It's flaky, rock-like, and it breaks apart easily in your hands, almost like a dry biscuit.
For sure. So like it's funny when I'm, doing my wine dinners and tastings, one of the things I talk about specifically with the Chianti Classico Annata is sort of figuratively like I want you to feel a little bit of that dust on your brow, right? And it's coming, as you step through, that dust is rising up. And so, there's a beautiful dirtiness, right? I think one of the greatest compliments I've ever gotten about this wine in particular is it's been referred to as farm in a bottle, which maybe for a Napa cab producer, that might be the biggest insult you could land at them. But for me, like, yes, that's about as perfect as it gets. And so that's the intention, right? There's a purity, and it's not just the fruit and it's not just the terroir, but it's the entire ecosystem, right? And it's this incredible potpourri of the forest. And this land where we are in the Concodoro, it's been referred to, and it's a beautiful term, as this kaleidoscope of chaos. And it's that chaos that's the magic and suspense of and the complexity of Chianti Classico wines that, ultimately is sort of grounded and rooted in this incredible Galestro soil.
Yeah, cool.
Go
I
ahead.
just somehow, when I was little, I loved sitting in the potato fields, and I just kind of picture that same sort of soil. So I know what you
Right.
mean. Dust around. No,
No, it's a glorious sandbox, and you want to get a little bit dirty, right? And that's
I
the point.
guess I don't understand any winery, winemaker, anybody that would get insulted by saying it's a farm in a bottle, because ultimately, growing grapes is farming. Ultimately, what we're tasting in the bottle is from the terroir, from the grapes. And now the winemakers just try not to screw that up and put together a great representation of what they harvested. It's a real delicate balance that I just don't get why someone would get insulted by that. Makes no sense to me.
it's like a bell pepper.
Well, yeah,
I
I
think I think the North American palate, the criticism can be laid out where, it really is dominated by sort of fruit and oak. And so, again, all of a sudden soil was, to me, that was sort of we wanted to Disneyfy, right? And so there's this, and I'll leave it at that.
well, I
We've been brought up on sugar, that's why.
we've been
No,
wrong.
honestly, no, but that's it. And then you get sort of hit over the head by a big oak baseball bat, and so it's just this punch in the face of sweet fruit and big oak, and I think that's somehow maybe we lost our way, that broad strokes, that's the definition of elegance. And, I see the market coming back towards that, the more nuance.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing that globally.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank goodness. Some wines we had this week. We had the Bodegas Escudero Arvum Rioja. We had the J.L. Wood Chardonnay. Of course, we had the Vel del Rosé Torrell Vermentino. Try to say that. I just
You could
botched that
say
up.
Antonio Pepoli Chianti Classico.
We did have an Antinori Pipoli Chianti Classico. Always, it seems like anything Antinori touches is quality, which is fantastic.
For sure.
Yeah. By the way, I think that there is a San Francisco-based sports team that I can get behind to help Daniel with that taste in his mouth about the Seahawk win, and that is it's baseball season, and I'm guessing you're a Giants fan.
Got to be
Or
a
are
Giants
you?
fan.
There you
Absolutely.
go.
Got to be a Giants fan.
Because if you're
So
an A's fan, it's not from Oakland anymore.
right, yeah, exactly. That's my heart breaks for Oakland just in terms of sort of the loss of the Raiders and the A's and kind of what it's done to that city, I think is devastating.
It is devastating. I don't like it at all.
I don't like when they do that.
Nope.
Like the Chargers should be in San Diego.
Who knows who is where?
It should be in Anaheim.
That's right. A huge thanks to today's sponsors, Seasons of Coeur d'Alene, Pilgrim's Market, and Jay Bookwalter. By the way, I have to say this. I wasn't going to say it today, but Jay Bookwalter, they're a sponsor of today's episode. John Bookwalter actually has been named by the Tri-City Journal of Business as an honoree for one of the people of influence in 2026.
Yeah.
We've had featured Jay Bookwalter wines twice on this podcast,
And they have a great restaurant.
and they have tours. Yeah, they're really expanding a lot. Daniel, how often do you make it up into the Washington wine region?
So Oregon it's a good market for us. Washington a little bit less so. This is one of my current struggles. So I'm hoping to spend more time. But Oregon certainly once or twice a year. Washington a little bit less, and I'm working on changing that. So I'm hoping I'll spend a lot more time in sort of the Northwest and certainly including Idaho as well.
Whatever we can do to help with contacts and things like that, we would love to do that. This is a fantastic wine, and great job with that. The book, go get it. There's a link in the show notes. If you do it from our link, Daniel will actually send you a signed copy. I'm making that up.
At this point, I'll send you a case of wine. Like, let's just go for it.
I made that up, and it'll probably come back to bite me. Said he would sign it. We are going to get this book out and around in our area and have people read it and show the love that way.
And is it going to be on Audible?
Oh, yes.
It is. In fact, it's going to be right now. It's on Spotify and a bunch of platforms, and the Audible. It's actually available on Audible starting next week. And so I'll on all my various socials, like kind of the @Daniel Mark Grace, etc. I'll make that announcement of the book release on Audible. As I say, it should be next week.
What I'm hearing from you did not read it.
Oh, I did. I recorded it in London.
Really?
Yes. No, I have
good for you.
I have a theatrical background. I've done some voiceover work. I used to own an ad agency, and so it was an incredibly intimidating process. And there's, in this book in particular, obviously it helped with, I think, my Italian, because there's a good, there's certainly some hints of Italian in it. There's some Irish accents, there's a little Aramaic, there's a little Hebrew. And so I had to dig deep. But it was, it's fun to be 55 years old and be completely sort of a fish out of water and intimidated by a process. And so I found that particular part of this process wildly invigorating.
That was the exact word I was thinking, is invigorating. Ad agency, you put together some Super Bowl ads. I did tease that before. What's the most expensive Super Bowl ad that you were behind that went up?
It was, typically, and this goes back a few years, but you're looking at, for that 30-second spot, that media dollar was, I think was sort of in the $6 to $7 million range, which is just, to me, crazy.
Well, we're half that on our 30-second spots on this.
Right, exactly. You should bump that up a little bit. Well, now that I've been on the show, clearly, it's about to tip the scales. But it's funny, I think back on sort of my former life in advertising, and I had an agency with offices in San Francisco and Boston and New York, and so much of my time spent in boardrooms and pitching things and corporate clients, and it just seems so distant. It seems so, I don't know. I'm like, who was that guy? So it's I prefer my elbows and my knees dirty and bloody, and so I think I'm in a better space now.
We live in those spaces very easily too. We love the dirt. I'm sure you've heard of Gary Vaynerchuk.
Sure, of course.
Gary says people always say the Super Bowl ads are way overpriced, and he said they're the best spend of your marketing dollars, because when you see how many people are watching that Super Bowl, you're not fast forwarding through.
No. I mean, you talk about a captive audience that is anxiously. I mean, it's funny watching, even now this past Super Bowl when I'm watching it, in Italy, I'm specifically kind of, keying in my VPN so I can get the US based ads. It's sort of ridiculous, but for me, it's half the fun.
It is. Next week, we're going to have a Tanat. I've made the decision because Tanat Day is coming up on the 14th. We also have the 17th is World Malbec Day, and the 24th is International Viognier Day.
Big days.
Daniel, thank you so much. This has been very, very fun. I feel like we didn't talk about the book as much as we should have, but we're going to get that out there on our.
We tease it up. All good. It's all about wine, and we're sharing the love. I love it.
Yeah, well, you talked enough about it to tease those that are like, I need to read that.
Exactly.
Go to the link below. You'll have 3 options, or go to Audible and listen to Daniel and the smooth talking voice.
Right. Then you'll really need a drink. They'll be like, please, can someone shut him up?
No, that's what they say about me. And with that said, with a little bit of knowledge, wine becomes a lot less overwhelming. Thank you for listening. Daniel, thank you again. Great book, great wine. And we will see you next week with a Tanat. Have a great weekend. Go Mariners.
Thank you for spending part of your day to wind down with Shelley and Phil. Remember, you can listen to any episode of the Wine Time Fridays podcast by visiting winetimefridays.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us on our Wine Time Fridays Facebook page, Instagram, or on Twitter, which is @VintageTweets, for daily conversation. Until next week, here's our toast to you: to health, wealth, abundance, gratitude, peace on earth, and of course, romance.